Happy Friday, viewers, and welcome to a new episode of TLO. By now, I'm sure everyone is acquainted with my friend Dino of Dino's Tinker Shed, the master wood maestro with the skills and generosity to make my load platform possible. Of course, Dino was also instrumental in the building of my first platform, a full rear seat delete, made necessary for a sleeping spot for my old dog Jackson. While the concept and execution of the build was flawless, with actual use, trip after trip, it became evident that some changes moving forward would make it slightly more practical. So now with my new co-pilot Lexi taking ownership of the passenger seat in the new Heritage Bronco, it was no longer necessary to have the doggo sleep accommodations in the back. Her smaller, lighter size made it possible for me to carry her up into the rooftop tent to sleep away the nights of weeks of long travel trips. And I'm pretty certain she wouldn't have it any other way. So like before, this build added a bit of complexity to the overall construction and required more than one trip to Niagara Falls to complete. The first trip down was during Victoria Day long weekend, so I was prepared for the inevitable traffic nightmare. However, the drive down was relatively painless. I don't get to see my friend Dino as often as I'd like, so it's always a pleasure getting to hang with him whenever possible. I don't know if he'd care much for me mentioning this on my channel, but Dino has recently committed himself to dieting, and I'm proud to announce that he is now down an incredible 70 pounds. Congratulations, friend. I mean, I don't really mind the suspenders look, it actually kind of suits you. But I think you're now safe to buy a new, better fitting pair of jeans. Because of the previous weather-related delays getting started on this build, Dino and I collaborated a bunch of times in the direction we wanted to go with this new floor. Without wasting any time, we took a couple of basic measurements to decide on how much plywood we were going to need and set to work. Basically, the plan was to make the construction a little bit less complicated and straightforward, but also incorporate some new changes and make everything practically a little better. I'm always a little conscious of the travel weight of my Bronco, so we settled on a 1/2 inch ply as a compromise between strength and the added weight of a 3/4 inch. Because of the change in configuration to this new platform, the fridge slide out from the previous build would need a bit of a trim down the width. This time around, I also decided against the indoor-outdoor carpeting of the previous iteration and planned to go with a spray-on bed liner instead, if for no other reason than appearance. We knew from the beginning that the best approach to this new floor would be to make it out of 2 separate halves, divided down the middle with a driver's side and a passenger side. The driver's side would be the easiest and the most straightforward. Once trimmed to size, it was laid in place on top of the factory seat and tie-down bolts to transfer the mounting locations to the plywood. After piloting holes into the plywood, we depth marked a large 4-center bit to slightly countersink the bolt hole locations. Once that was carefully done, a smaller bit was used to punch all the way through to the mounting hole. Next, we needed to measure and mark the cutout location for the spare tire jack onto the plywood. Dino recommended a nice large radius cut to the visible corner to better match the radius in the Bronco's floor. Because the previous floor used furring strips under the plywood to fully countersink the mounting hardware, it sat up a little higher than this new floor, which obviously gave us clearance issues while pulling out the fridge slide. To rectify this problem, Dino simply ripped a couple of 3/4 inch strips to raise up the slide out to clear the tailgate floor. Carpenter's glue and some subflooring staples ensure that everything stays where it belongs and for a long, long time. Where previously on the old floor we used 1/4 bolts threaded into T-nuts, we decided a dozen 1 1/4 Phillips head wood screws would be more than strong enough for this build. and simplified and speeded up the construction measurably. With the slide out finally mounted, that was the driver's side of the floor complete. Pretty straightforward. With that done, it was time for a midday break on the front porch with an ice cold glass of Fresca as we discussed the plan of attack on the passenger side floor. Dino has always been the kind of intellectual who you can bounce ideas off of, and he can visualize what you're trying to get across, and always build off your ideas or offer alternate opinions to further the discussion. This is what makes such a collaboration like this so great. Alright, back to the Bronco. With a roughed out piece of plywood for the passenger side floor, I wanted to make sure we kept the access to the jack and the handy in-floor storage space that Ford gratefully provided in the Bronco. When set into place, you can actually see the concept come into life. Full access to the factory in-floor storage areas. And so now it was on to the biggest difference from my previous build, a pull-out drawer accessible from the tailgate. Because today I left Lexi behind at home, the day was quickly growing long and it was almost time to pack it in. But not before Dino and his wife generously prepared a nice barbecue dinner set out on their back deck. As much as Dino loves working with wood and helping his friends, barbecuing is obviously also a passion of his. Before I set off on my drive home to Kitchener, we finished off the outer drawer construction and finally called it a day. We surprisingly got further along than I imagined we would. The following weekend, Dino needed to get going on his new deck project, so it wasn't until the weekend after that we finally got back together with the Bronco. As nice as his deck is, he'll admittedly say it's a little short of shade, and so he has designs on fixing that. I can't wait to see it all finished and enjoy the next barbecue out there. Dino's a pretty busy guy, and I'm super grateful that he finds the time for me to lend a helping hand. With the downtime I had in between visits, I managed to put down a couple of coats of bed liner on the driver's side plywood, and I think I definitely prefer this to the previous carpeted on the old platform. The new concept this time around, and a glaring issue I found from my previous setup, was the better access to the super handy Milwaukee pack-out boxes. So the best setup with the constraints we were working within was to have them mounted on top of the new pull-out drawer. After a little discussion, we quickly came up with a game plan. So basically, the height of the stacked pack-out boxes was going to be the limiting factor for the height of the drawer. The only minor compromise now for this setup will be the need to remove the drawer to gain access to the in-floor cubbyhole. Not really a huge deal. Dino makes quick and easy work of the inside drawer pieces, ripping off the base and sides as easy as you like. With a set of these slightly awkward but totally helpful corner clamps, more glue and staples and some careful lining and squaring, the inner drawer was just about finished. Talk dirty.
That's it. Come on, here we go. Oh yeah. That's spinning around.
Some skillfully hand-drawn staple guidelines laid down, and it was back to the basement for some special one-off custom touches. Part of the reason for the drawer being the size that it is that I wanted more counter space at the back of the Bronco for dinner prep. You could never have enough kitchen counter space. And so I commissioned Dino to come up with something to give me a usable platform for my cutting board. Case in point, I wanted my cutting board to sit perfectly flush on the top of my drawer, and this would require a pair of rests on each side of the drawer for the board to sit on. So instead of measuring and drawing a line on the plywood and then eyeing up the board rests for that line and hoping you have both sides attached identically, Dino cut a strip of wood the same width as the cutting board and used that to reference and mount these rests. This ensures both sides of the setup are perfectly identical, level, and square. With the inside drawer finished, we needed next to find the proper location for mounting the drawer sides to it, for again clearing the plastic floor trim at the tailgate. With a pair of paint mixing sticks as a spacer, Dino squared up and marked as best he could the height where the slides would be mounted. And again, for more precise aligning, Dino cut a strip of plywood at the required height he measured for the slide, and used this to guide the fixing of the drawer slides on both sides of the drawer. Besides making both slide tracks the same height, this also ensures they are both level with each other and square to the drawer. I could imagine if you're making a full kitchen with countless drawers, this would be the way to go. And somehow during all of this, we both started referencing one of our favorite Mike Myers movies, So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Hid! Pants!
New!
That's new! That's right.
Walking around with pants. His girlfriend's over.
If you haven't seen this one, do look it up. The scenes with Mike and his mom and dad are absolutely priceless. With the drawer just about finished, again we hauled it up from the basement and test fitted it once more, this time to get an idea for the face plate mounting and to test the working space.
That's how your kitchen's supposed to be laid out, right?
The work triangle.
Yeah, I just need the sink.
That's right. Fridge is in the wrong spot. It should be hanging out over here.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's funny. Oh, that's good, Eric. I like that.
With measurements taken and another piece of plywood cut to size, use this scrap piece to test the profile of a routed bead edge before finally finishing the edge of the faceplate. And that was basically a wrap for the build with Dino. All that was left to do was the bed liner spray and final assembly. Once back home, I first got to work with aligning the slide out and making sure there were no unnecessary rattles or squeaks. Next came the drawer platform. We utilized the trio of Bronco lasso anchor points to secure it in place. Finally, it was a drawer reassembly, including the best, blingiest drawer handle Dollarama had to offer. Nice, right? In all seriousness, I'll likely replace this with a more appropriate braided paracord handle or something in the near future. As I mentioned earlier, to gain access to the in-floor storage cubby, you simply have to remove the inner drawer from the cabinet and reach through the opening. Not a bad compromise between accessibility and aesthetics. Before I left Niagara Falls, I had Dino mount a pair of tabs on the cutting board shelf so as to keep it from sliding around. Job well done. Next it was adding the Milwaukee pack-out base plate to the top of the drawer. We used 1/4-20 bolts and T-nuts here to keep everything securely in place. And finally, the jack cover trim piece, complete with a finger pull opening to cover the spare tire jack cubby hole. As snug as you like, clean and simple. I'm pretty excited to have this better access to my pack-out boxes, whereas before they were inconveniently placed sideways behind the fridge. Another change I decided on with the Bad Mule 2.0 was turfing the semi-permanent residential 100-watt roof-mounted solar panel for this 140-watt foldable setup, which stows nicely under the fridge slide. And of course, when not overlanding, the same storage space easily holds a large-size industrial pizza box or two. So there it is, the new load floor. Still with the convenience of a third seat, to still usable space for a duffel bag full of clothes, for example, and all while retaining the fridge pullout and improving accessibility to everything I need while traveling. So that pretty much brings us up to speed on the Bronco. Again, thanks for tuning in and watching. Thanks for your support. If you haven't already, like and subscribe, and we'll see you again here next time on The Lonely Overlander.